The Golden State Warriors suffered another significant blow in free agency on Monday when power forward Rui Hachimura agreed to terms with the Los Angeles Clippers, closing the door on what had been a reported connection between the two sides and further thinning an already narrow pool of available options for a franchise that continues to wait on LeBron James. Hey, what's up, everyone? Before we jump into everything today, that like button right there is what decides if this video hits hundreds or thousands of people. 1 second is all it takes, but the impact on this channel is massive. Go ahead and hit that like button right now. Seriously, it's the simplest thing you can do. And honestly, the best way to back this content up, because every single like pushes us further. So hit it now. ESPN insider Shams Charania broke the news that Hachimura signed a 2-year deal worth $28 million with the Clippers, a move that had been anticipated once the market began to develop. The Warriors had reportedly been in contact with the Japanese-born forward, and his shooting ability made him an attractive name to track. But ultimately, Los Angeles moved faster and with more convincing offer, and Golden State is left to recalibrate once again. The loss of Hachimura is significant, though not devastating on its own, because the fit between him and the current Warriors roster was always debatable. Golden State's forward rotation is currently built around players who profile best as power forwards rather than the small forward position. The team has Guay Santos and rookie draft pick Yaxel Lendeborg among the healthy forwards under contract, and fully expects to bring back veteran cornerstone Draymond Green, who opted out as player option earlier this offseason. All three of those players are best suited to operate at the 4, not the 3. Hachimura himself is most effective as a stretch power forward. His calling card is three-point shooting, and it is an impressive one. He has connected on 42.6% of his attempts from beyond the arc over the last 3 seasons combined. That is an elite mark that would have added a legitimate perimeter weapon to any lineup. However, his shortcomings on the defensive end, specifically his struggles defending opposing wings with quickness and agility, raise real questions about whether he could hold up on that side of the ball in a Warrior system that has long demanded defensive versatility from its frontcourt players. What Golden State actually needs most is a wing forward who can cover the 3 position defensively against the league's best small forwards. Speed and lateral quickness matter most for that role. Hachimura, despite his shooting value, does not grade out as a plus defender at that spot. So while the Warriors losing him stings from a shooting and positional depth standpoint, the more honest read is that he was never a perfect solution to the team's most pressing roster need. That brings the conversation around to Zaire Williams, the Brooklyn Nets forward who has not yet been linked to Golden State in any reporting, but who many observers consider the most realistic wing target still available on the open market. Williams checks important boxes as a defender, where his length and activity make him a genuinely disruptive presence, but his three-point shooting has been inconsistent, hovering around 34.2% over the past 2 seasons. That number leaves room for skepticism, though his defensive upside alone makes him worth serious consideration. The complication is cost. Williams will likely command more than a veteran minimum contract, and the only mechanism the Warriors have to exceed the minimum is their mid-level exception. That creates a direct conflict with the LeBron James situation. If Golden State intends to keep roster and cap flexibility available for the 4-time MVP, committing mid-level money to Williams becomes a complicated calculation that almost certainly has to wait until James makes his decision public. That dynamic is a central tension in the Warriors' entire offseason to this point. Every move and every delay connects back to the James question. The longer his decision lingers, the more names disappear. Anthony Simons, Colin Sexton, and now Hachimura have all moved on. Each departure tightens the range of outcomes available to Golden State in the event James chooses a different destination. Adding to the urgency is a pressing decision the Warriors face regarding restricted free agent Quinton Post, who received a 3-year, $30 million offer sheet from the Memphis Grizzlies. Golden State has until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday night to decide whether to match it. The expectation within league circles is that the Warriors will let Post walk to Memphis. Matching the offer would cost roughly $10 million per year, and, more critically, would eat into the cap flexibility the organization has preserved specifically for a James signing. Even setting aside the James angle, Many within the front office are said to view $10 million annually as an overpay for what Post brings to the roster at this stage of his career. If the Warriors choose to match, it would send a clear signal to the rest of the league. James is no longer a realistic target, and the team is pivoting toward retaining its existing core and filling needs with the resources they have left. If they let him go, they are doubling down on a plan that, as each day passes, appears increasingly uncertain. Golden State is playing a high-stakes waiting game, and the market is not waiting with them. What began as one of the most exciting storylines of the 2026 NBA offseason is slowly curdling into a familiar and painful pattern for the Golden State Warriors. The franchise's pursuit of LeBron James, the four-time MVP who officially departed the Los Angeles Lakers earlier this month, is now showing unmistakable signs of falling apart. And the warning signs are too loud and too consistent to ignore. ESPN insider Anthony Slater, who covers the Warriors as closely as any reporter in the business, reported on Monday that Golden State sources are expressing only a low level of optimism that James will ultimately choose them as his next team. That framing is careful and measured, but what it communicates is hard to misread. The Warriors know they are not winning this race. The same report indicated that despite the pessimism, the organization intends to keep roster and cap space available for James until he formally announces his decision. They are not ready to give up. But holding open space for a player who is unlikely to arrive is a gamble with real costs attached to it. The early days of this free agency period told a very different story. When Draymond Green opted out his player option, it created a financial scenario that gave Golden State genuine leverage in the James sweepstakes. Green's departure, whether temporary or permanent, cleared significant salary from the books and made the non-taxpayer mid-level exception available, a number that matters enormously when structuring a deal for a player of James' caliber. James himself confirmed his exit from the Lakers, and for a brief moment, the Bay Area felt like a credible and even likely destination. The Warriors were discussed openly as early frontrunners. That momentum has since shifted decisively in another direction. The Cleveland Cavaliers have emerged as the overwhelming favorite to land James for what would be a storybook third chapter of his association with the franchise, where he became a champion in 2016. A return to Cleveland carries obvious emotional weight, and by all accounts James is leaning heavily toward that reunion. The Warriors' window to change his mind appears narrow, to the point of nearly closed. What makes this situation particularly frustrating for Golden State is that it fits an uncomfortable pattern the franchise has experienced before. The Warriors spent considerable time and resources over multiple years accumulating draft picks and assets with one primary goal in mind, positioning themselves to make a serious run at Giannis Antetokounmpo, the two-time MVP and one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world. That effort ultimately amounted to nothing. The Milwaukee Bucks traded Antetokounmpo to the Miami Heat last month, and Golden State never entered the final equation in any meaningful way. The same organizational approach, hold assets, keep flexibility, wait for the star, played out without a satisfying conclusion. Now it is happening again. The Warriors are preserving space for a player who may not come, and while they wait, the free agent market moves forward without them. Players they were genuinely interested in have already signed elsewhere. The team sits in a holding pattern while other franchises are building and improving, and the clock continues to tick. The toll of this waiting extends beyond just missing out on perimeter additions. Restricted free agent Quinton Post, a young big man who showed real promise in limited minutes last season, received a 3-year offer sheet from the Memphis Grizzlies, and Golden State faces a Tuesday night deadline to match or let him walk. The expectation is that the Warriors will not match, choosing instead to preserve the flexibility that a potential James signing would require. Losing Post for nothing, on top of free agents who have already walked, leaves the team's depth looking increasingly thin regardless of how the James situation resolves. If James does choose the Warriors, all of the sacrifice will feel justified and even prescient. But if he chooses Cleveland, which the available reporting strongly suggests is the more likely outcome, Golden State will end up following a roster that has real gaps, fewer available resources than it would have had if they had acted more aggressively weeks ago, and a fan base that will reasonably want answers about why the front office spent another offseason in a waiting room that led nowhere. The Warriors believed in the dream. Right now, the dream is looking more and more like a nightmare. There is also the broader question of Stephen Curry's timeline. The greatest shooter in NBA history is 38 years old, and while he remains a high-level player capable of carrying an offensive load, the window to build a championship roster around him is not unlimited. Every offseason that ends without a meaningful addition is a missed opportunity that cannot be recovered. The Warriors have made the calculated bet that James is worth the wait and the collateral damage. When James finally announces his destination, Golden State will either celebrate a franchise-altering win or scramble for whatever remains of a free agent class that has largely moved on without them. The next few days will define this franchise for years to come. With the LeBron James free agency saga dragging on and the odds of him landing in San Francisco growing longer by the hour, the Golden State Warriors are beginning to identify alternative paths forward. According to ESPN's Anthony Slater, one of those paths leads directly to DeMar DeRozan, the six-time NBA All-Star, who was released by the Sacramento Kings on Monday and is now free to sign with any team in the league. Slater stated clearly that Golden State is expected to look into DeRozan in the coming days, and that interest will intensify significantly if James ultimately chooses to sign elsewhere. The timing of DeRozan's release and the Warriors' reported attention toward him were not coincidental. Golden State has an obvious and urgent need for a reliable scoring wing to complement Stephen Curry, particularly given that Jimmy Butler, the veteran star the team acquired earlier this cycle, remains sidelined by injury with no clear return timetable established. DeRozan, even at 36 years old, represents a credible offensive option capable of creating his own shot and generating points in volume. DeRozan's resume speaks for itself. He averaged 18.4 points per game with the Kings last season, and in each of the 12 years before that he averaged at least 20 points per game, a streak of sustained offensive production that very few players in the modern era can match. He has built his reputation on mid-range mastery, a style of play that has often been dismissed in an era obsessed with three-point volume. Yet DeRozan has made it work at a remarkably high level across nearly 2 decades of professional basketball. His footwork in the post, his ability to draw fouls, and his clutch gene in late-game situations have made him one of the most consistent offensive players of his generation. The Warriors are not alone in their interest. Slater noted that the Miami Heat, who are still sorting out roster construction following the finalization of their trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo, are also considering a move for DeRozan. Miami is additionally pitching to James, creating a scenario where the Heat could potentially be pursuing both players simultaneously, while Golden State watches from behind. The Los Angeles Clippers, who have been active throughout this free agency period, are also mentioned as a potential destination, partly because DeRozan is a Compton native with deep roots in the Los Angeles area. The Toronto Raptors, the franchise where he spent the first 9 years of his career and developed into an all-star, are likewise in conversation, according to Slater's reporting. That level of competition for DeRozan's services creates its own complications. If multiple contenders and marquee franchises are lining up to offer him opportunities, Golden State may not hold a structural advantage, especially if the Warriors are still holding back financial flexibility in the hope that James changes course and chooses them. The Warriors could offer DeRozan more than a minimum contract, depending on which moves they make in the coming days and whether they ultimately let Quinton Post walk to Memphis. But the full scope of what they can offer remains tied to the James decision. There is a philosophical question embedded in the DeRozan conversation as well. He is not a perfect fit in every sense for a Warriors team that has built its identity around three-point shooting and off-ball movement. DeRozan takes fewer threes than almost any star-level player in the league, preferring instead to operate in the mid-range areas that Golden State's system has historically tried to eliminate from opposing offenses. Integrating him into the pace and space framework that Steve Kerr has run for years would require genuine adjustment on both sides. However, the Warriors' need for scoring is pressing enough that fit concerns may take a backseat to production reality. The bigger picture here is one of contingency planning. DeRozan as a consolation prize after missing on James would represent a meaningful downgrade in terms of the ceiling this Golden State team could reach in the 2026-27 season. James at 41 continues to play at a level that makes him genuinely transformational for any roster he joins. DeRozan, while excellent on his own merits, does not move a needle in the same way. The gap between the two players in terms of playoff impact defensive versatility, and overall gravity on the court is significant. But DeRozan is available, experienced, highly motivated to win, and fully capable of helping a team compete at a high level right now. For a Warriors franchise that has refused to enter a full rebuild and owes it to Stephen Curry's remaining prime years to stay relevant, DeRozan may prove to be the most sensible, realistic option left standing once the James chapter finally and inevitably closes. Golden State cannot afford to stand still, and DeRozan gives them somewhere to go.